What's interesting to me is that God is a covenant-making God. God wants to make a covenant with us, not a contract. A contract, once, like Rudy mows my lawn, and we have a little contract together, and I pay him to mow my lawn. And I paid him up until a certain date, and he mows it to that date, and he doesn't mow it after that date because I didn't pay him. The contract's fulfilled. And with a contract, the task is done. It's a good task. Nothing wrong with that. But God is not a contract-making God. God is a covenant-making God. And the point of a covenant is not so much the task that's to be done, although there's a task to be done. It's the relationship that develops. Covenants are all about relationship. And a covenant is never exhausted because the fruit of a healthy, positive covenant is a deepening relationship. That's why marriages are marriage covenants. Yeah. I bring that up because I was thinking the other day, having led trips to Israel and for a number of years, and especially Egypt. And that Egypt trip, I've had not a few people comment about how the Israelites grumbled in the wilderness. They grumbled, and they get some, in my opinion, a little bit of bad press on that. But here's the question: they grumble in the wilderness. Have you ever noticed when they stopped grumbling? I mean, they grumble. They grumble. They have a whole series of complaints. Moses doesn't begin so well. Moses goes to Pharaoh, let my people go. Pharaoh says, you have too much time in your hand to think such thoughts. Why don't you get your own straw? So make bricks without straw. And the Hebrews complain that they have to make bricks without straw. And I understand that. They complain about that. But then the plagues happen. All these amazing miracles happen. And Israel is impervious to it. I mean, all these things happen to the Egyptians, but not to the Hebrews. And so they're on their way out. They've had this Passover, and they're on their way out. They're at the Red Sea, and here comes Pharaoh's chariots, and then they start complaining. Why did you bring us out to the desert to die? Are there no graves in Egypt? They complain about that. Well, there's the miraculous crossing of the sea, and there's the Exodus 15, the Song of Miriam, the Song of Moses, and these are heady, high times, but it doesn't take long, just a few days, and they're complaining about water. Then they're complaining the water's bitter. Then they're complaining about food. Then they're complaining about what kind of food they're getting. Then they complain about water again. It's complain. And what's interesting to me, after all of these miracles, after all of these things that God has done for them, when they hit a bump in the road, they bellyache. When the Hebrews are just recipients of God's blessings, God's interventions, but not partners, they complain. In my opinion, I'll lay it down, you don't have to pick it up, but in my opinion, they stop complaining when God says these words, "Have them build me a sanctuary." God invites them to participate, and they all participate. Some people participate by their gifts, and some people participate by their skills. When God says, "Have them build me a sanctuary," God is inviting us to participate with Him in a covenantal relationship by taking our responsibility. Because they didn't have to build the sanctuary. They didn't have to build the tabernacle. But they did. And as they built the tabernacle, they participated with God. And so you and I are in a tradition, as a Judeo-Christian tradition, where to be a Christian is to be someone who responds to God's call to our responsibility in our covenantal relationship with Him. What we have, what He's given to us, it's a position and a people who know that what we have is all for Him, and what we do with what we have is based upon us, our choices, our efforts, how hard we work at something, how faithfully we work at it, how we stewardship. We have this partnership and relationship with God. And frankly, you don't want God to do everything for you. You don't want to stay on a milk diet. You want to struggle with God. Because it's the moment you begin struggling with God, it's in partnership with God, that the complaining stops. Now, listen, in my opinion, and this is what I found, our partnership with God, this covenantal relationship with God, is less of a walk and more of a dance. It's that dance between understanding that we're dependent on God, and we are dependent on Him. We're dependent on Him for every beating of the heart. We're dependent upon Him of every breath of our lungs. We're totally dependent on God. And yet God has set it up in such a way that by the work of our hands and how we steward what He's given to us, and He holds us accountable. So there is this dance between total dependency and, well, what it talks about in Deuteronomy 8, where by my hands have I done this. It is that balance between the two. And that together, the building of that Mishkan, the building of that tabernacle, that it's the first great building project that God's people did together. And the complaints die. It's interesting. One rabbi, one sage pointed out that the Bible begins with God building the universe for man to dwell in. Genesis begins that way. Exodus ends with man creating a Mishkan, a tabernacle for God to live in. It's working together. Here's a thought. One sage said, it's not so much what God does for us that changes us. It's what we do for and with God that really changes us. Think about that.